Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to start kind of right as we get going here. So we, again, appreciate your time for being here. We did change a different location from last time. We have our play that they're in their final rehearsals right now, and there's 15 or 16 other events going on in the school right now. So this is kind of where we ended up being. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jared Wright. I'm the principal of West. It's good to have you here. I'm also a parent of a student, just have one left here, a former teacher, and then actually graduated in 1998, best year ever. I keep saying that. 70, okay, we got a few. I just got to remember where our alumni are, right? But Whitney and I were 98, so that's good. We're just actually going to launch into this with VCBO. These are architects. We have Whitney, Jeannie, Brian, and Alex from VCBO. We've spent quite a bit of time here at West actually working in workshops since our last meeting, 2-day workshops in September, and then actually just spent a couple days this week working with each departments in addition to quite a few meetings and stuff just to collect data and input from stakeholders and to individuals as well as the survey data and stuff. So we're excited to see what they have to present to us tonight. So here is Whitney.
See, can everybody hear me? There we go. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I actually really love the Media Center because I think it's a nice size venue for the crowd that we have. The auditorium would have been a little bit overwhelming. So thank you for joining us. As Jared mentioned, we've been working on this project since early September, specifically the feasibility study, which I'll touch on again, what's included in a feasibility study and what we've been doing over the last couple of months. And so we wanted to start off our presentation with a reminder of our two priorities for this project. Number one is to provide the most exceptional learning environment possible for the students of Salt Lake City School District. And then the second is to make sure that we honor and preserve the rich heritage of West High School. We know that there are generations of people, Salt Lake City residents of our world that have gone to school here who have been able to thrive at West High School. And we don't want to lose any of that history or heritage through the work that we're doing. In fact, we want to heighten and enhance that as we move forward. So just a quick reminder of our process. We are getting towards the middle of our process. So we are doing a number of outreach events, both internally with students, with faculty, with the community, working towards presenting a feasibility study to the district in February. And so you can see where we are at our second community engagement event. And we've been doing, as you can see down here, we've been working through what is the vision for West High School, where is West been, where is it going in the future, and we're right in the middle of our defining space needs and prioritization and adjacencies, which again we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So just as a quick reminder of a feasibility study, at the end of this study, we're not going to have a full-blown design for this project. What we will have is an understanding of the student capacity that's needed for West High School. We're going to understand the individual spaces that are needed within West High to make sure that it can provide that quality education that the school is known for. We're going to have priority adjacencies, which departments or spaces need to be next to one another, and then concepts of how that might be able to fit onto the campus. And so we're going to be looking at how to use the existing West High School campus to facilitate the project. And then we're also, of course, going to have potential construction costs associated with that as well. Because at the end of this, the board will decide if they would like to move forward with this sort of initial concept and work towards a bond in November. And so again, as Jared mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work both with the school community as well as the broader community. Here's a high-level summary of some of the work that we've been doing since September. So you can see we had our first community outreach event about 2 months ago, September 7th. And since then, we have had what we're calling our Reflect, Inspire, Discover workshop, and that occurred in September 19th and 20th. And with that workshop, we had a great group of about 40 to 60 people in this media center for 2 days to really understand the vision for West High School. We then did a range of facility tours, and we took faculty, administration, of course our design team, to look at schools in Utah to see what the best schools in Utah are providing for their students. And so we've looked at a number of recent high schools, Hillcrest, Farmington, Alta with its renovations, Brighton, to see what's working well, what opportunities exist to make sure, again, we're meeting that excellence in education. And then there's also some national schools that are being toured to make sure that we're looking at other comparable schools in urban environments and what is working really well across the country. Yes, and I'm going to have Alex help me. So some of them are in the Seattle-Tacoma area, and the other ones I believe are in California. We haven't been to California. Alex, can I give you the microphone?
So as the architect group, we've done some research with our national consultant to find schools that could have some comparable characteristics to what West would have: site constraints, historical site, a rebuild site. For instance, like Mount Si was a 100-year-old school that then they rebuilt on the campus. How did they incorporate kind of that rich heritage into the new design? So we're trying to find things that would be applicable for West. And the great thing about a tour is you see things that work really well, but you also see things that maybe don't work really well. And you can talk to the teachers, you can talk to the administration to get feedback and help inform some of the decisions that we'll make with West with the steering committee. We can go into some of those. Let's have the questions at the end just so that we don't run out of time. Specific programs and things, each school has its own unique characteristics. So I don't know if we have a direct answer on that, but we can look into it.
Thank you, Alex. And then we also did a presentation with the district with representatives from the community councils across Salt Lake City. And we have received a couple of invitations to present at community councils and have offered to present at community councils across the city, specifically within the West High School boundaries, to make sure that we're sharing and engaging with the community as much as possible. And then we just finished up our first round of programming workshops with the faculty, where we really dove into what are some of the space needs and trying to understand, again, how big the West High Reimagined might need to be. And so these are a couple of images from our Reflect and Inspire and Discover workshop. The goal of this workshop was to spend a day looking back on the history of West High, understanding what has been really successful in its past, what has helped to craft it into the exceptional school that it is today, what we want to make sure that we're carrying forward, and what opportunities we have to continue to improve West High as an experience for students, for teachers, and for the overall community. And so at the end of this, and I'm not going to read these word for word, but we came out with some goals and some themes that we wanted to share with the community. You can see this mission statement. At West High School, we strive to build a school that embraces each individual, that connects with the community, and celebrates our unique culture and history. And that's something that's very important to, again, the core of West High School. And then we had a number of guiding principles that emerged as priorities: integrated learning experiences that are deepened through engagement and relevance, looking at time management, flexibility and space utilization, integrating technology appropriately, and really building a school that enhances relationships. We know that relationships in and amongst the students and faculty, and the community can continue through the lifetime of that student. And we want to make sure we're providing those environments that facilitate and build relationships. And then we also understood that West High School is right now and will continue to be an engaged community partner. That its location in the heart of the district is vital to, or the heart of the city is vital to the success and the opportunities for the students. And we want to make sure that the community continues to have access to and engages with West High School. Once a Panther, always a Panther. I know, how many of you guys were alumni? I know a number of you. Yeah, see? We're all Panthers now, right? And so we want to make sure that we continue this strong tradition and history of West. And then, again, celebrating learning and putting learning on display. One of the things that we heard is there's so many incredible programs that are happening at West High right now, but so many community members and even students may not know they're here because they're tucked behind walls. And so really bringing out and heightening, celebrating the work that's occurring here. And then hopefully you guys all had an opportunity to take our broad survey that went out in September. And we had an incredible response of nearly 1,700 people for this survey. And you can see we had a good range of past student and alum, current students, community members, and folks related to West High in some way or another. And we asked people what was most important about their experience at West in this survey. And you can see the strong relationships with fellow students is the #1 takeaway. Number 2 is access to unique and quality academic programs. And number 3 is the location of West High School within Salt Lake City. And so there's a ton of incredible factors that contribute to the success of the school, but these are sort of those top 3 that we heard from the community. We also asked people to tell us what 3 words they would use to describe West High. Historic, tradition, community, gathering, collaboration. You can see diverse, landmark, iconic, all of these incredible terms that really reflect the perception of the community and the experience that folks have had here at West High School. And then finally, we asked people what they hoped for future generations. And we had some incredible responses. We grabbed just a smattering of those to share with you that we felt reflected the trends of those comments. So you can see here, I would like future generations to feel a part of the West, the history of West, while getting a world-class education. We want to balance, maintain the culture and connection with the history while being sustainable, inclusive, and forward-thinking. We want to preserve what's been so great about the school while continuing to look forward is really the trend of the comments that we received here. And then again, as I mentioned, we just finished a 2-day whirlwind series of meetings with faculty members across the school to talk about the spaces that they're teaching in now, the vision that they have for where they'd like to teach in the future. We're starting to translate that into a spreadsheet of how many different learning environments, what types of learning environments, how large do those need to be. And so when we get together in our next meeting, we'll have an idea of how big the West High Reimagined might need to be. We're not there yet. That's a work in progress. We also did an exercise during these last 2 days to really make sure that we're looking towards what that learning environment of the future wants to be, what is envisioned for both the students and the faculty to be successful in the future. And these were some of our faculty responses to what they would like to see in the student commons, in a learning space, and in the school as a whole, what would get them excited to continue to teach here. And you can see here, daylight, flexibility, comfort are all very important to the faculty at West High School in whatever the future holds. And so the next step is to really look at what site configurations might be viable for West High School. And so right now, as I said, we're still working through exactly how big it is. We've looked at a couple of different footprint options. We've actually looked at way more than these, but we honed in on 4 options that we're going to assess in more detail. And these 4 options illustrate the range of possibilities on the site that are physically feasible and that would incorporate different elements of the existing campus in different ways. And so we have option 1, which is a replacement in place while preserving the entirety of the original 1921 building, so this whole west building. So preservation here, and then rebuild of the facilities that exist to the south. Option 2 is very similar, with the exception that we would just preserve the facade of the original building and take down the existing building behind it and build new educational environments on the west side of that historic facade. Option 3 looks at the opportunity to build a new school across the street on the east side of 300 West, and then come in and infill on the west side to meet the athletic needs of the school for PE and athletics. And then option 4 is looking at building a new school south of the current footprint of West High with the replacement of elements on the south side of the current building. And so these are the range of options that we're going to be diving into in a lot more detail. And as we look at the detail that we're going to be assessing for each of these, we've taken our goals of the best educational experience possible and honoring the heritage of West High, and we've expanded those. And so to those goals, we've added meeting the Salt Lake City School District sustainability goals, both for environmental impact and longevity, identifying a path forward that's cost-effective and constructible, and then the final one is looking at the potential impact for the students that will have to live through the construction process, because it's very important that we minimize that negative impact for those students. And so each of these are full of a lot of elements that we have to look at, that we need to assess and understand. So you can see here for looking at the educational experience, we're looking at optimal flexible learning environments to allow teaching to occur today, 10 years, 20 years, 70 years into the future. Optimal adjacencies between departments so that the groups that are working collaboratively together are near to one another and can continue to enhance education through that collaboration. A site that's easy to access, navigate, and clear to move around. A site that is safe. A site that enhances student learning through providing comfortable learning environments. Has good access to daylight and views. That's one of the big things that we heard from our survey and from our faculty, is access to daylight in the learning spaces is vital for West High. And then ease of access to parking, and again, safe and secure campus. The next one is honoring and respecting the rich heritage of West High. So these will all be evaluated against their ability to preserve the original building, the ability to back off of that and preserve the facade, or the ability to honor the heritage and history through preservation of specific elements, art, and storytelling, integrating that into the future experience. Again, looking at the goals for sustainability, we'll be looking at this through the lens of, can we work towards those net zero carbon neutral goals for West High School? Can we be both energy efficient and generate renewable energy on site? Can we get the systems integrated into the building that help us achieve those goals? And then finally, can we reduce embodied carbon in the work that we're doing and through the materials that we choose, or preservation of elements? And then finally, the last two are really focusing on a cost-effective, constructible solution. And so that's looking at the cost of construction, the timeline of construction. Anytime we're doing work in an existing campus, we know there are potential for a lot of phases of work, which the longer the project goes, the more that influences cost over time, as you guys have seen over the last couple of years. And then there's also some construction staging impacts and student safety that we need to consider, as well as the potential for risk for the district through the different options. And then the path that has the least negative impact for students during construction is directly related to that construction longevity, and where the contractor has to work in and around the campus and how that influences the students over time. And so again, we're in the middle of sort of the muck of this process, if you will. We're delving in, diving through information, working through options and alternatives to really try to hone in on the preferred alternative for the district that best meets the long-term needs of Salt Lake City School District, the students, and the community for West High School. And so we're excited to continue to move forward with this and to present more information to you guys as we discover it in our next community meeting. So finally, we just want to pause here with our 2 primary goals. And then we also wanted to provide a contact if you guys have any additional comments or feedback after this open house. You can send that to the district, and then they'll make sure that it gets to the right person. That's our formal presentation for the evening. So now let's open it up for questions. I know there were a couple out there. Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Great. Of course.
So Steve, this was really actually, we talked about this, right, with Northwest that actually is now shifted to the model. That's actually worked out very well. They have with their paraprofessionals where they're located, the teaming they do. They even have unique bell schedules to those learning suites, those learning pods, right? We saw a school up in Seattle that was award-winning and pretty, there were some nice features to it. The teacher and I, after we were in there for about 10 minutes, we both looked at each other and said, this feels like West High, a new West High 15 years down the road. And as we kind of, it was nice, it was new, there were some nice design features, but after talking with the 2 of us and with the architects, it was definitely, you could see that the school did not apply the design that the school district had designed with there, right? So there are some elements there that have to be in there, and that deals with consistency and leadership and programming. And actually, I think a key to that is the input that they're gathering right now from teachers, being able to call out an understanding that some of the input is very specific to a teacher that's a program. The program runs because you have that teacher that has the expertise, but also looking more as far as you can long-term to say, here's an area that is flexible, right, or could be reconstituted in its nature, so it's not so specific to something that couldn't be adjusted easily for that. But that was a lesson learned actually from that tour, right? It was very much that there's a part that would need to be done on the West High community as far as faculty and staff in the design phase, but also when we move in that we're applying the principles, right, that we're trying to use in a new design building, however that shakes out. It's a good warning, but it was clear in one of those high schools. So.
I would just add to that one of the things that we really are working very hard at and we have for some time is making the buildings very flexible so that those changes that come along, they can be accommodated, right? because you're quite right. I mean, 50 years from now could be quite different.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not the first person to bring that up. That's come up a lot in our research of the community, but also the staff and students. They are wanting a balance between needing specific parking and encouraging pedestrian and bikes and things like that. So we completely want to embrace that. With regards to 300 North, that historic street that's been kind of chopped up, there's tons of utilities underneath there and everything like that that we're only starting to discover. But the idea of connecting whatever happens on our site, connecting that to all of the communities on all four sides, and getting the context of the historic value that we have here, and also adding that into whatever we build in the future is going to be very important. To tie in with your comment about facadism and your comment about saving as much as we can, that's two of our schemes include trying our best to make sense of doing something that retains as much of that historical West as possible, but yet still being actual and being able to really build it without affecting a budget and also the lives of the students that will go here. So we're talking about a process that's upwards of a decade long that would affect thousands and thousands of students. And so that's what Whitney was talking about in trying to minimize that and mitigate that idea of how much impact that's going to have, not only on the community, but the students and their learning. The 4 years that they're going to be here during a big construction, that's a big thing that we need to consider. But we're also building a facility that should, 100 years from now, have people just like you saying, hey, we gotta save this building, right? So it's about striking that balance. And Whitney, more than half of the slides were about, and I hope you guys caught that, but more than half the slides were, how do we retain and capture the awesomeness of West High School and what it is and what it has meant to so many thousands of people, but also what it means to the city. So that's one of our biggest jobs in the feasibility. But the more we dig, the more we find, right? And so it's a really fun and exciting process.
Yeah. We're working through that right now. We don't have an answer for you yet, but we've been looking at, based on these different options, we're going to lay out what the phasing would have to be to keep the school fully operational through construction. And so because we're just diving into how big it is and where things are going, we are still working through some of those details of how long it would take. But to Brian's point, based on our recent experience, we could see this being a 6 to 10 year project, depending on the site and the configuration and a lot of information. But we don't know each of those phases, each of those options, what that looks like yet. This is part of our risk to the district that we're going to be assessing.
That was one of the factors in protecting the taxpayers' money, right? Because bidding a project as big as this next year or the year after a bond passes, and then have that be a 10-year project, there's no supplier or subcontractor that's going to hold that price because it changes every 6 months, let alone over a 10-year period or an 8-year period, right? So we'll have to be really smart in how we maximize the dollars that we have to spend because they're sacred, they're your tax-paying dollars, and we take that very seriously. And so it would be done in phases, it would be done in bid packages. It's very exciting, but also quite daunting, right?
Awesome. Yeah, I was just gonna dive into that. We actually, one of our programming meetings yesterday was with the physical education athletics team, and we had a lot of robust conversations about how to continue to accommodate those super cool things in, again, the heart of the city. Yeah.
Dan, I love that you said that because it's true, right? It's actually a convention center when you open that thing up. It's massive, right? Right. No, it's amazing. VCBO is actually going to come to our Spirit Bowl in March because they need to know, right? It's exactly. Y'all know what I'm saying. No, we're going to have them, and we're going to assign them a grade, and they're going to be in the middle of a grade, and it's going to be, and then they're going to need therapy for a couple months, right? But it's actually, it is unique to this school. That's been our facility since the 70s, remodeled back in 2000, whatever. There's I could say this from the district leadership side, but also definitely from VCBO. There is an awareness of that, but also our location in the city, right? Having the capital city wrestling tournament here, right? Given our proximity to downtown and freeways and everything. The athletics facilities that we've looked at as we've toured around and that this company's actually designed are phenomenal, right? So not only having lots of space, but really well-designed space that is a lot more multi-purpose for square foot than even we have in our own gym. So that is just something we want to make sure we have a place where we can fit 3,000 plus students, we can have large events, and having multiple events going on at the same time. That was key, and they designed the athletic center up at Ben Lomond High School. That is a phenomenal facility that's better use of square footage and has exactly what you're talking about. So it's exciting. Just don't let Dan twist your neck because he'll do it.
Can we move on to the next question?
I was just going to say to you that to maybe help to comfort you, the existing staff, especially athletics, are very passionate about not only retaining whatever you guys have, but improving on it. Like that meeting yesterday was very eye-opening. 2.5 hours. We had to have a break. Everybody had to have a nap. It was wild.
Nobody was thrown in the air yet. Throwing a yet out there. We've been really honing in on the historic original 1921 building for our preservation efforts. One of the challenges of all of those additions that have occurred over the years at West High School is that the science wing is all the way over there and other academics are over here, right? Things are kind of all over the place and a little bit disjointed, which is a big conversation we're having about putting elements of the school closer together that need to work more closely together. And that's really hard with the way that the school's been used. So we really are looking at that preservation here.
Yeah, and actually, the gym is 50 years old now, so it's, you know, it's starting to be, it would be in need of a lot, and we're looking at it, though.
72. We had, yeah, the new gym is 50 years old. We did have in our last community presentation, I'm sorry we didn't bring it, but we had like when all the additions were done over the years, and it's been impressive to see the work done to West High.
It's not the original building, right? So the idea of keeping as much of the original 1921-22 building is part of those first two options that we're looking at. Again, we're in a feasibility study. We're not designing anything. We're trying hard not to design anything. We're just looking at concepts and ideas and seeing how feasible those are. But you can imagine us trying to build a building right on top of where 2,700 kids are going to school. Really tricky.
So just to add on to that and to make it clear, we showed those four options, and then Whitney kind of went through all those different priorities. And so really, the steering committee that's been put together will evaluate all of those priorities, and option one might score high in one area and low in another. Option three might score low in that area, high in another. And so really, we're trying to use all of that information to then give you guys the best end product.
Thank you. And I was going to say there was a question over here, yeah. So that is a really good question, and that came up in our community council conversation as well. Unfortunately, because of the site constraints that we have, it really isn't feasible to then add housing on the site in addition to that. And I can't speak to what the district is doing, but I know for our project, it's really not within our scope that we're looking at. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, it hasn't been part of our charge, and I think it will be a challenge to fit with everything else that wants to happen on site, but I think it's a great comment.
That's what we're developing right now. The district had that because they wanted every elementary and middle to have parity, right? And it made sense. But you don't have a program for a high school, and so we're making it.
Yeah, so we just spent the last 2 days meeting with faculty members, representatives from departments across the school to understand what those space needs are as our first go. And then we'll work through with them, refining it to really hone in on what those space needs are to be able to share in the feasibility study. So as we went through those sort of considerations and those goals, what we're trying to do now is, as we talked about, parse out a little bit more detail how those four site concepts rank against all of these goals of the district. And so we're putting together sort of what we're calling a decision matrix that will help to inform what ultimately will be in the best interest of Salt Lake City School District West High School students. And so that's a process that we're going through right now. Our first step was to identify the goals and then sort of the elements or the considerations that contribute to achieving those goals at the end of the day. And then we'll look at each of those four options against them to see how they rank in priority.
And one of the things, we're having contractors. We've hired a very good firm that has experience in this type of project, who is providing some cost estimates and time estimates for us.
So those four options that you saw there, really broad brush, really basic concepts. Designing a school for 3,000 kids you're talking about a lot. And after our meeting with athletics, the school doubled in size, right? Trying to shoehorn all of that stuff into a site that has a state highway running through the middle of it is a really daunting task. And so those 4 options were concepts that came from 12 different ideas that we had, distilled down to 4 rational options that will then use that matrix that Alex was talking about to grade them and have at the end of it, hopefully as unbiased and empirical evidence as possible that will have budgetary things included, time, the effect on students, all of the acknowledging the history of the site, all of those things taken into consideration that will lead us to that one option that we would present to the board. Well, we've already had 1,700 influences. Yeah. We're not designing anything. And today is one of those reasons that we're here to listen to you. What we keep on hearing is that we need a facility that embraces and gives back to the community. And what we've seen magically and wonderfully is that the current administration and teachers and staff and students are wonderful, powerful people that are really awesome, and they're working in a space that is not as awesome as they are, but has this really cool embodied energy that we're trying to take and give them the facility that they deserve.
Yeah, we'll go back to the back.
Before we answer that one, I had one last thought to add on that last question. No, you're just fine. Sorry, I wasn't quick enough. But VCBO architects are tasked with this feasibility study. So these options that they're presenting are not final by any means. And I wanted to just add that after they are done with their work and they present their findings to the Board of Education, at the end of the day, the Board of Education will vote on a final design. So somebody asked how they could get involved and how the public can have input. Talk to your school board member. We have one current board member here today, Bryce Williams, and then a board member-elect, Ashley Anderson, in the middle here, who will represent this area of West High School. So please make sure that your elected representatives are aware of your thoughts. They welcome your input.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Well, Jared, you're our structural expert.
It's incredibly safe. We've done 2 studies with engineers in the 8 years I've been here, and the findings are great. And it's a great. So sometimes publicly we say the place is really not safe. We worry more about mechanical systems, instructional spaces. Those type of things are the things that are really driving the need to rebuild it. But your children are safe in West High School. Well, as we've discussed, is that this is a long process. We still have to go through the feasibility. We have to potentially pass a bond. We have to potentially design a building, and we still have to run. And hypothetically speaking, a bond could not pass. And so, if we don't maintain the buildings that we're currently using, we could find ourselves 5, 10 years down the road and really behind the square. So, in my department, we have to act like the building is still going to be here indefinitely. So I'm Paul Schulte, excuse me. I don't know of any visitors' locker rooms that we have on the capital plan. Yeah, so we're not constructing anything new. lockers, not a locker room. Yeah. So well, one of them was a chiller that kept, and Jared will say the building's as cool as they've been, and so we have to keep keeping the building cool. And so it's, yep, those type of things. Yeah, we've got to keep moving forward like this building's going to be here. And we have to be able to pivot both ways. So I understand exactly what you're saying. Alan, my boss and I, we talked about it, but we just got to keep pretending. If a bond doesn't pass and the building doesn't get rebuilt, I can't let it go into disregard it for 5 or 10 years. I got to keep making sure it stays up to the standard that our students in Salt Lake are accustomed to. Well, things are expensive.
So I would say yes, and here's why. There are 2,600 students that go here now that are not going to be here when this process even begins, right? They're going to be gone. They deserve the best, functional, cleanest, safest. They deserve to have bells that work. Our PA system is beyond its age. It has to be replaced, right? We don't have enough lockers for football and lacrosse, the larger ones. They ended up being piled on the side. This has been planned for some years, so we're going to add those lockers, those type of things. In our capital improvement meetings with the district facilities individuals, they're very, very well aware that they're not going to spend money unless it's absolutely necessary. But we're not going to compromise on our students' safety and experience here today. As a taxpayer in Salt Lake, I'm watching that very carefully. We had 107 degrees in September, if you recall. We were 105 plus for almost a week and a half. They just updated some of the air conditioning system, which you could look at and say that maybe wasn't necessary. We were able to have a week and a half of school in a building where it was actually cooling. It was actually comfortable in this building. And that was with a lot of effort for efficiency and some modernizing. So I will advocate strongly that our students need now, here today, they need that investment. And there is a lot of awareness to make sure that we're not doing anything that doesn't need to be happening. But those things that you've seen on Capitol, scoreboards can be moved, and it needs to work, right, with our 6 teams that play out there, right? We still have to function, right? We still have to function as a school. And that is going to be donated money, and that is something I will advocate at the top of my lungs to provide a health clinic. So in that regard, then the expense our students are worth it. The students here today are worth it. The students here in 50 years are going to be worth this effort here. So I would say resoundingly, yes. Is it justifiable? More than justifiable. Yep.
I realize I also forgot to introduce myself. My name is Yandari Chatwin. I'm the district spokesperson, essentially. And I wanted to just add, $2 million sounds like a lot of money, but in terms of the broader whole entire district budget, it's about 0.6% of the broader district budget. And so we do our best to make sure that we are being wise stewards of those tax dollars. That's also part of why we're doing this feasibility study. When we go out to bond, we want to make sure that we're knowing exactly how much money it's going to require to do this, so that we're asking as little as possible of our taxpayers. We know it's going to take a lot, but we want to make sure that we're doing it right. So thank you for that really great question. And I'm actually really impressed that you're reading that closely and following that closely. We need more people like you, so thank you so much for that question.
I just want to emphasize, I think it is a great question, but I want you to go back to the pivot, back to the chiller. So when we have these type of HVAC systems, mechanical system, and that was about $1 million or so, it was a big expense. However, if it was to go down, the parts to repair that they don't even exist. So we couldn't even repair it if it was to go down in the middle. So those are the type of decisions and things we're looking at.
I Yeah, and so we are planning on coming. This is not the last time you're going to see us as the community members. But it is also important to note that at the end of this feasibility study, we're not going to have a full conceptual design. We're going to have where the project can sit on the site, the massing perhaps, and how much it could cost the district. But we do anticipate sharing that back with the community, and we'll work with the district. We'll work with the district to make sure that the community has good input. I don't know the exact timing of our next community dates yet.
It's also important to reiterate what we have been hired to do. We have not yet been hired to design West High School. We have been hired to see what could be done. And that literally is not much more than what you saw earlier. It's developing that program, figuring out how big these chunks of school are going to be, how they can be built, and where they could sit on the site. And then that's where our contract ends. Hopefully, with a bond passing and a happy district and a happy client and a happy school, we will develop a design that would continue to have community input. But we're just not at that place yet.
He also feels very passionately about West High School. Yep. Yep. Well, we will have a public meeting again in January in advance of, as Paul reminded me, in advance of the presentation to the board in February. You're welcome.
And can I just add that I think just going through this process that the school district is doing, not all school districts go through this process of really making sure that they get that right amount for a bond. A lot of times they'll come up with a number, they'll go out for a bond. And so I think just this process is that effort that the school district is doing to bring everybody on board and make sure everybody knows what's happening with this process.
And I think the work that's been happening early in this feasibility study, the feedback we've been able to get from the community, your presence at meetings like this, the great interactions that we've had so far have been really valuable in helping shape the direction we're going. So thank you guys for being engaged in this process as well. Okay, you've got 2 left. Yes, every time. And the teachers, the faculty members spoke to the faculty members. It wasn't just us as architects, but it was teachers saying, how do you feel about this class? Or how do you feel about a collaboration? Or what do you like about your classroom? Or what's working, what's not working? And then we're pulling all of this in. And the other thing that's very important to recognize is every tour we've gone on has been, here are things that we like, here are things that we think could be successful. These are not West High School. West High School is a unique high school. It will have a unique solution, has a unique history and heritage that isn't reflected in our tours, and the faculty and the community recognize that.
So Steve, you and I are good friends, right? And we think a lot the same, and we've had some good conversations. I would say I have faith in district leadership and in the board and in VCBO, and that's just come by me listening and observing very, very carefully as I do to where they do. Because the common theme is we want the very best for our students. That has been, our students deserve the best. They need the best. Our moral imperative says that we should provide the very best instructionally and the facility, and as those go hand in hand. And if that ever changes, I'll call you. And you will. But I can say that with confidence that this has made me feel excited about where we are for the community that I'm a part of as well with everybody here. And I know I said this at the last meeting. I've had to surrender some of my own attachment to my West High experience because I have to realize it's not about me and the greatest class ever in 1998 and tell everybody goes along with that and I keep saying it. But really looking at our generation now and the one that we can see coming up through the elementary schools And as much as we can see in the future, right, that it's about providing the very best for them. And I've had to do that by taking down some of my own emotion about the building. I still care for it deeply, but taking a different view and then listening and being open to saying, what are some experts saying? What's the vision from the district? And then particularly what teachers and students are saying, and here tonight, that we do it right. The nice thing I like about this timeline is there's time to do it right? We're not in a crisis. We are at a high need, I think, to take a serious look at the West High campus. But there's lots of data gathering, and these people are like sponges. They're listening to everything. They ask lots of questions, and I go off the beaten path when we're touring, so it's just me and the principal or a teacher or counselor, as do the teachers do. So they're getting direct conversations with them. So.
Excellent. I think we maybe have time for one more question if anybody has any final question. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for coming and like I said, for participating. We're really grateful for all of the feedback that we've gotten so far and all of your thoughts. We know and appreciate again how important West High School is to the community, and we're excited to be a part of this project. I don't know the answer to that yet. We haven't set the date, have we? Do we have a date for January? Not yet. Thank you guys again, and have